Hi, you're listening to the Ahead of the Herd podcast. I am your host, Chris Hurd. And this week, we've got a really exciting conversation because he's a great bloke. I kind of think he's a mate, even though we've never met in person. It's Patrick O'Neill from Redhand Advisors. Say hi to everybody, Patrick.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Of course.
And I definitely would consider you a mate, even though we haven't met in person yet.
We're going to move from mate to actual friends as soon as we meet in person.
I love it. I'm sure that will happen.
I don't know what's closer, mate or friend. I'll have to figure that out.
Wait, so is bloke before that?
Well, okay, we're off to a random start. I like it. Bloke is just a bloke. You can just be a random bloke. That's anybody. That's just some bloke off the street.
I gotcha.
Yeah. So
we're definitely more than that. We're definitely more than that.
100%. So Patrick is the president and CEO of Redhand Advisors. They're pretty much the authority on RIMUS. And a lot of you might not know what RIMUS is. So what I'm going to do, Pat, if you don't mind, introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background on Redhand is, maybe a little bit about RIMUS, and we can start there.
Sure. Yeah. Again, thanks for having me. So, Redhand Advisors is a risk management, or as we call it, risk tech advisory firm. We provide consulting services to large corporations, insurance organizations, et cetera, helping them manage all aspects of risk. So the RIMUS stands for Risk Management Information Systems. It's kind of the core of the systems that provide these services, but that's a small piece now. It's only a subset of really the broader risk tech marketplace. But as I started as a RIMUS vendor and kind of evolved into a RIMUS consultant, and now I've broadened my my experience into this broader risk tech marketplace.
Nice. So you started as a vendor, went to a consult. Why did you make the shift?
Good opportunity. The organization that I was with was preparing to divest. The RIMUS space historically was kind of owned by large insurance brokers. So the brokers owned these systems, and they weren't really great owners of technology because it wasn't their business, wasn't their core business. And so the two big boys in the space decided to divest the technology, both of them moving to being owned by PE firms. Long-term, much better for those organizations. They've thrived under that. And they were getting the business ready for sales. And I was in to be sold. And I was in a senior position, and they were trimming the fat. And I got a great opportunity to leave and decided to start my own business. I love this space. I've been in it for my whole career. And I felt like I could provide continue to help clients, but be agnostic now to the platforms that were out there. And that's kind of how I started.
I love it. I actually found that for myself as well, just from a sales perspective, it's difficult when you've just got one solution to sell to somebody. And you know that they have a bunch of needs. It's really hard because you kind of have to pigeonhole them into that solution. Whereas when you open yourself up, you really are solving people's problems with whatever's available, right?
That's exactly right. And you couldn't do that as an independent, with being one of the providers, even with some of the niche players that are out there, which might be really good synergies. That really was never really that wasn't our marching orders. Our marching orders were to sell. And I was more on the client service side. I solved problems. So I did manage sales for a period of time, but kind of my calling was always about helping solve the client problems. So once they got implemented, getting them to get more out of these systems. And that's what we do now. That's what my organization does for our clients.
I love it. Without changing the topic, we can stick on this. Sales is my bag, as I'm sure you know. So going from selling a product to, you still have to sell your consulting services to customers, right? What's the difference in that sort of sales cycle, sales process?
Yeah, it's very different. And maybe I'm probably thinking more of where it is today, because for me, when I worked for the vendor side, I mean, there was legitimate competition. We were, one of the giants in the space, but there were a couple of other strong competitors, and you had to differentiate yourself and have the right cost benefit for the client. Whereas today, and it certainly probably wasn't this way 10 years ago when I started Redhand, but we're known as kind of the industry, we're the place to go. We're the RIMUS experts, and so there's not a lot of selling here. People find us, which is great. Word of mouth. I don't do real true advertising at all. And a lot of times, what I guess I'm selling is, or convincing my future clients of, is how we can improve the process, right? Because when they bring us in, they're bringing us in for exactly what I used to do, which is they're going to select a system. They may not know where to start. And so what we're doing is we're coming in and saying, hey, we can help. We understand this space, and we can make this process get you better outcomes, probably quicker and likely cheaper than if they were doing this on their own.
That's fair. I like I love the idea as well with consulting that, like you were saying, ROI is a big part of what they're looking at when they're looking at software. With consulting and services, if they like you, they're more likely to buy off you. When you're selling it, when you're a vendor, they might like the salesperson, but the decision isn't based on whether they like you or not. So you really have to be a lot more focused on that. So have you seen that the relationship piece has been good for business and consulting as well?
The relationship piece is huge. Back to the beginning of our conversation a few minutes ago about being mates and so forth. I mean, most of my clients, we form really tight relationships. I hadn't actually thought about it the way you just described it, right? So if a salesperson selling software, ultimately they may or may not like me, but they're buying the software. When they buy consulting services, they're buying me, right? I'm going to be sitting alongside them for this journey, which could be 6 months. It could be, I've got a client right now, we're on year 2.5 because I'm involved all the way. Now we're involved in supporting them during the implementation. And, I build really tight relationships. And I think that goes back to the whole, when I ask people, when I get a new client or a new opportunity and I say, well, how'd you find us? There's a couple ways, and we'll probably talk about the report in a couple minutes. But a lot of times it's, oh, so-and-so in the industry recommended you. It said, oh, you can't go down this path without Pat. Or, hey, I did business with you, two jobs ago, which happens all the time. I mean, I could count on my hand how many of my clients have become close friends. And just to use one real example, so I was in Dallas yesterday for a client advisory meeting for a large client of mine, and they had their largest clients at this meeting. I got hugs from 3 clients that were there who were my former clients. Who that's kind of the relationship we have, right? It wasn't like, oh, there's Pat, he's my consultant. I try to build a strong bond. I always, I'm a salesperson at heart as well. I like the solving problem piece, but I'm a people person. And that's what I enjoy about what I do.
I love that hugs is a success metric.
Yeah, it's huge. You're never sure but I got 3 yesterday, and I initiated one of them, but it was all good. I don't know. It just shows it reinforces that I think that I'm building the right relationships with my clients.
Yeah, 100%. Margins might be down, but if hugs are up on the quarter, it's showing we're doing the right thing.
I need to put that on my dashboard. I need to put hugs on my HubSpot dashboard.
100%. Everyone needs to add that. It's great. Okay, so moving from being a vendor to a consultant sounds like it's really positive for you. Lots of pros. Are there any challenges that are unique to the consulting industry you didn't have before?
Oh, good question. I think coming from the vendor side, I think there is that you kind of have to overcome first that you don't have a bias, whether it would be positive or negative to your former employer, right? It might be positive in some ways. They might think, well, if you left on bad terms, maybe you wouldn't. So the independence part, I think, is I don't think it's a huge challenge, but I do think that comes up, and also, do you only see it from one point of view, right? Do you only see it from the experience that you had as a vendor? But generally speaking, I'd say not really, not much at all.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're managing a bunch of stuff that you wouldn't manage before, but it's more fun. I find running a company is a lot more fun than just being a salesperson because so much more
sure, yeah, and more broadly speaking, when I think about kind of what I do, whether it be I do consulting, right? But it could be anything. I like working. I like working for myself, right? I love the independence. I love that I can decide, where we're going to focus, and we've made some changes over time. But I get to decide where I'm going, and I get to spend more time with clients. What I found in my previous job, and you get to a point where you're managing people and managing teams, is I didn't spend enough time with clients. I didn't spend enough time doing what I really love to do, and that's why it's funny. I talk to people I've known a long time. They're like, well, you had this big job, and now you've got this small consulting agency. I was like, yeah, and I love it. I'm talking to clients every day. I'm solving problems at client meetings. I'm not doing board presentations and monthly budgets and forecasting. I mean, I do some forecasting for myself just so I know where the revenue is, but not to the extent that I was doing in kind of corporate America, let's call it.
100%. Independent America is great.
It is. It is.
100%. And independent Canada. Yeah. So, Will, you do a lot of interesting things with your consultancy, which I think is great. And you were really one of the first people that I've seen that creates independent analyst reports effectively. Lots of people have a go, but you have this. How long have you been doing the RIMUS report?
So we'll be publishing this year's in about a month. It'll be our 8th edition. So 8 years.
8 years. Okay, amazing. So I got a few questions on that. Firstly, how did the idea come about to do an analyst report?
Yeah. So started my consulting business. It'll be 10 years this summer, and it kind of a logical extension, actually, in having like kind of many industries. Our little market RIMUS space is incestuous, right? So my organization got acquired by another company, so a lot of people I used to work with are there. I know people who've gone. We all know each other, right? And particularly at the leadership level, and just over kind of casual conversations with some of the vendors that were looking for a kind of independent view of the marketplace. Obviously, I'm sure in their minds to promote themselves. They felt like I was given this idea that as an independent consultant, you have the opportunity to maybe be that voice for the market. We're in a small market, the RIMUS space, and kind of it's growing very quickly. But I'd say traditional RIMUS, it's smaller than it's less than $500 million industry. I don't have 5 competitor organizations in my space, and I've certainly created a nice niche for myself. And so it kind of morphed into, is there a way to, and I'll tell you, I did it a little bit for myself, which was that process of doing this report helps me understand what's out and available, because sometimes you wouldn't get that opportunity, right? You're working on individual deals. You may or not be exposed to all the different capabilities and products that are out there. Particularly now, there's so many niche players in this broader risk tech space. The report gives me that window every year as we go through that process. We open up the request to, I think this year we invited 65 or 70 vendors to respond. We got 45. I'd like to see all 75 respond, because I think they belong and should be the people who read my report should know about them, but they'll come along for the ride at some point. It goes up every year, which is great. And so it's evolved over time. I'm really proud of the report. That's it behind me. But it's also a big lift. I'm in that moment right now. Today, this is a good little break from. I was working on some of the articles for the report right before we got on the call today.
Okay, so it's a big lift, but you've been doing it for 8 years, so clearly you like doing it. So if you're, it seems like it. So if you're speaking to another consultant about this, and they're in a similar, a niche industry where they know a lot of the vendors, etc.
Sure.
What would be your advice to them? Like, first off, yes or no, invest in it, and then if the answer is yes, why? And if the answer is no, why?
100% invest in it. So I said earlier that I get, I don't do advertising. I get a lot of my consulting engagements from referrals and word of mouth, but I get the highest percentage is from the report. So when I ask that question on, how'd you find me? What I get is, we downloaded your RIMUS report. We used your RIMUS report a couple of years ago. We keep up with the market with your annual report. We get over 5,000 downloads of the report a year. It's free to download. Anyone can go to my website and download it. And I've also met people who say, hey, I've used your report to help make my selection process. And we know that we don't probably fit everyone's business model in terms of paying for consultants and things like that. So I think what it does is it positions us as thought leaders in the space. And so the investment that we make, and I'm in the middle of it right now, it has gotten easier, right? Over 8 years, we've automated it. We took a significant step this year with Olive in the way we automate the collection process, because there's two pieces to it. We've got all the vendor data we just talked about. There's another whole side to this. We do a user survey and get almost 1,000 respondents each year. These are people in the space that either use these vendors or are in leadership. They're risk and claim professionals that have an opinion about technology. And so we marry that data together in the report. But I would say if you're in kind of a niche space and have, already kind of are either positioning to be or a thought leader in the space, I don't see why you wouldn't want to do something like this. Whether it's ours is a PDF report at the moment. I've got aspirations to be even a more interactive online tool, but it pays dividends to us. And I have a model that the vendors sponsor the report. You can kind of go a couple different directions with this, right? You could charge for the report, like the Gartners of the world do, right, to download their reports. Or you could look to the industry. And like I said, kind of started this with some feedback from vendors that thought this would be a beneficial tool for the marketplace. And so I created a sponsorship model. It gets them an ad, and it gets them an ad in the report. It gets them a 2-page profile. It doesn't get them a ton, but what I see and I know is they're sponsoring it because they know this is for the good of the industry. And we don't pick winners because every solution is unique, when you go into an individual opportunity. But it gives you enough information to start maybe shortlisting the vendors. But we focus a lot, particularly this year, I spent some time changing up the report, that the questions we ask the users or the professionals out there, because they're not all using systems, is what are you looking for in these systems? Where are areas where these systems can help that they're not helping today? Where is AI fit into this? We used to spend more time asking them, what do they think about the tools they have? And we still do that, but we've shifted the focus so that we can understand where this is going. And I think that helps the vendors as well, because the vendors want to hear that same thing. Every time I talk to the vendors, like, when's the new report coming out? I want to hear what the users are telling you that they're not telling them, or that they're not asking, to be honest. People are busy, their heads are down, and they may not understand where their clients are trying to go and how they can help support them.
I find it so interesting that consultants, and really we've been working with consultants for 4 or 5 years, but really only focusing for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And the more and more I dig into it, the more and more I realize that you're data gatherers, you're like information gatherers and sharers. And really a lot of what you're doing is information business. And that's so interesting that you mentioned that you're not just gathering information for the buyers to say this is what the market looks like. You're gathering information for the vendors to say this is what the buyers think.
That's
And
exactly right. Yeah.
playing that middleman. How has that how has that changed over the 10 years you've been doing this?
What part? I'm sorry.
So I imagine 10 years ago that consulting services were a lot more about meetings, whiteboards, and conversations. And today they are more about data than they used to be. Oh, and that's just an assumption. I may be wrong. Would that be fair?
No, I think that's fair. I think it's very fair. Yeah.
So maybe I could ask, how have you seen that shift in how both vendors and buyers are accessing this information, and where your role is in that position, and where do you see it going in the next 5 years?
Yeah. So, on some of our largest consulting engagements, where our clients want to focus is really on the data. So one of the other benefits of doing the report, and I just want to close my comments, except for when I'm in the middle of building it, it's the best thing in the world, and I enjoy it. And the day I get it out, I celebrate, and it's a great day, and then I can put it away for 5 or 6 months and start the next step. But the data also gets me. They're self-serving here. The survey we do of the clients and the professionals, the risk professionals, gets us this invaluable data that I can slice and dice to use when I'm working on opportunities. So if I want to know what the largest organizations in the US are thinking about and what risks they're having the most trouble managing with technology, I have that at my fingertips, and I have a broad list. I mean, we're uh, getting 1,000 respondents to a survey gives you some really good data to say, hey, this really does show us where the market's going. So the decisions are data driven. The other part that I use it for is we collect this data by the vendors. Is when I shortlist vendors, because what my clients want to do is they don't want to just hire a consultant and then throw out an open RFP that goes to 20 vendors. They can do that without me. They don't need Redhand to do that. What we can do is, again, using our data and making data driven decisions. I can help them and help them understand why I would shortlist certain vendors. And that's going to be based on what they're looking for. It's going to be based on where their kind of price point might be or their budget, and other components that they might be looking for. And so they can feel more comfortable about that process, about why are we focused on these vendors? Why did we not select other vendors? The first question I get from a lot of clients is, so who should we be looking at? And I said, I don't know yet. I haven't even figured out what you need. I mean, I can throw out the biggest vendors in the space, but they may not be the right fit. They may not be within your budget, and maybe they'd be overkill. And not to say they are, but until you really understand what that is. So there's still the whiteboarding part. You still have to do that process. We've automated some of that, right? We've improved with technology, but it's so driven then by saying, okay, how does that match up to what the industry's saying? I also get the question I seem to get all the time from my clients is, what am I not thinking of? Right. So they'll tell me what they're trying to do, but they'll be like, but we know other people. So what are the best practices? And so I think that's the other area where I think that we can help as consultants is we see a lot of deals. We're involved in a lot of projects, and I can say, well, my clients focus on X, Y, and Z, and you've mentioned X and Y, but have you considered Z? Oh, we do it all the time. Just never thought to bring it up with you, right? We
Yep.
didn't think that there was an application, or we do that in spreadsheets right now. And then when you dig in, it's a pain, and they'd like to improve it, but they would have never maybe thought of that being part of what they were trying to do. So
You don't know what you don't know is a huge thing. We find that
exactly.
all the time, right? Like one of the biggest problems to start with when we were building Olive was, I don't know what requirements I need. Can you help me find those? And that's a big value, and that's a big part of the data, right? Just gathering that data. And if you're constantly talking to both sides, that's where you're in the place. Because if the buyers start talking to the vendors, they know they're going to get sold every time. And the vendors can't spend their time just chatting to buyers unless there are opportunities. But you have that as a consultant. You actually have that that benefit or that privilege to be able to speak to both sides without any other sort of distraction. You can just gather data from both sides and then share that with the other side, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of benefit there in a couple ways. I think about it more as we go into helping clients when they start to implement these systems. Is I always say that we're kind of a bridge between the vendor and the client, because the vendor speaks tech and the client speaks risk, and they don't always understand each other. And I guess I'm fortunate that I've been in this space, and the folks that I work with are in this space, that we kind of understand both sides. I mean, I didn't come out of school with insurance degree or risk management degree, but I've been in this space long enough that I understand it. Where you get, some of the vendors, some of the folks that are involved, that they don't have the same experience, and so when a client says, "Hey, I'm trying to manage my total cost of risk," they don't understand what that means. And then the other side of that is back to the knowing the vendors as well as we do, and I think that's a huge benefit. Is that I know how they can all check all the boxes. That's part of the problem with just kind of the traditional RFP process, which is everyone can check off every feature. And that's not even them. They're just saying, yeah, we do this, but it's how they do it. It's the nuance to how they do it. And very specifically, particularly with workflows for clients and organizations, some of those check boxes don't really work for the way the organization is looking to, for things that they have to overcome. Maybe they have to collect data from around the world. Well, they say they do, they collect value or exposure data, we call it, in the process. But do you capture it with multi-currency? Do you capture it in multi-language? The things that may be required for a complex organization.
Some might say you're the olive branch between the buyers and the vendors.
I've heard that somewhere. I don't remember. I think it's already taken though, Chris. So I'm not sure I could
I'm
use
gonna
it.
keep saying it on every every week now. All right, I'm gonna before I got a fun question for you then, but I want to ask you about the future first, which is never fun. Everyone's always scared of the future. So let's scare everybody with what's the next 5 years, or excite them. Maybe it's lots of people think it's positive. What does the next 5 years look like for Redhand, and for the IT consulting industry in general, from your perspective?
Yeah. Well, I think a big piece of consulting and Red Hand, the way I'm looking at it, I think is the same thing that's in front of I think all organizations. I think AI is changing everything and the way we're doing things. I'm not scared it's going to make consulting go away, but if we don't adapt and adopt AI in pieces of the way we do business, we're going to get left behind. The same is true for the vendors. I just in my presentation yesterday at this client advisory meeting, I spoke about kind of the haves and the have-nots of the. I look at all these systems. I'm managing or looking at 50 or so different vendors, and there are vendors that are not even really thinking about AI at the moment. I mean, they're thinking about it, but they're not doing anything, and they're going to get left behind very quickly. This AI adoption is on a curve that to maybe use a Canadian. It's on a hockey stick curve. It's out of control, and it is. And we play hockey here in the U.S.
Yeah,
too pretty well.
they field hockey in England.
Yeah,
Same kind of thing.
it's all around football. And then we can talk about football the same way, different terms. But I think the disruption, and if we don't figure out how to change the way we do business in this space, and I guess I'll speak specifically about consulting. I think we're going to get left behind. It's already in just the past, I'd say 18 months or so for my organization, it's significantly improved our efficiencies. And I know I'm not doing that as efficiently as I could. I think there's so many opportunities. So we're walking before we run. Um, I do think it's hard to replace though. I do think what's interesting is like the big box consulting firms. I think, and I don't run into them a lot, and I know the organizations I do business with have relationships with those organizations, maybe not specifically in the risk and insurance departments, but they have those relationships. And very infrequently do I see competition. But I do think that's one of the reasons, and this is one of those things that isn't changing. That specific knowledge of the industry and the players, and what the challenges that our clients are trying to overcome. I think that's something that I think the winners are going to be people that are hyper focused on that, and that's why I think even today I don't have a lot of competition from kind of the bigger players that do a lot of whiteboarding and make up pretty presentations. you know, but I think AI is going to be huge. I think also that organizations, because there's this so much rich data, I think there is a potential that people are going to look to maybe figure out how, can I do this myself? Or is there a way I could check boxes and automate this process? And I think there's probably somewhere in there that I can adopt my business to do some of that. It's not going to replace every consulting project, but back to the ones where I mentioned earlier, where I'll get stopped at a conference and someone will say, I used your report last year to help narrow down and make my choice. I probably didn't fit their budget. But if we had tools available online that did some of that, I think there would be a huge opportunity. But I think data and AI is going to be the driving force. And if you don't have that, I think you're going to get left behind.
100%. And consultants are in an interesting spot, because I feel like you're not selling the horse and buggy. You're selling the driver services.
Right.
So you just have to learn how to drive a car.
That's exactly
that's the difference, right? So you're in a good spot. And then I also love this idea. I love independent small companies. I think they make the world go round. And I think as a small independent consultant, what's really powerful is you have a very deep knowledge of one area, very specific deep knowledge. And if you can build up the data moat for that specific area, you're setting yourself up for an absolute win moving forward, because you plug AI into that, all of a sudden you are taking on the big ones, the big companies, and the like what you call them, the box store consulting firms. I like it. So I think there's a really good opportunity for these smaller consultants now, especially if we take your example of building a very rich data set of the players and the buyers in this specific space, then leveraging AI and technology to build interesting content like analyst reports or just other ways for buyers to interact with it. You can set yourself up as the thought leader for your space. And at that point, you don't need to be as big as the biggest company ever. We won't name them here, but the biggest consulting firms in the world. You can stay your specific niche, but you can own that niche so much easier than you could before this, right? Okay, cool. So we'll go to something. I don't know if it's that fun, but I do like a good anecdote. I love a good consultant anecdote. And I've worked with some customers when I was selling and Olive as well that have been amazing. And there's just amazing stories of how supportive they've been and things that they've worked through. And then there's been some customers that have just been horror stories, the worst. So I don't know if you have an anecdote on either side of a client where they've either been absolutely amazing, they've gone above and beyond, and they've been bizarrely like positive for you, or on the other hand, someone that's just been a horror story to work with that consultants can keep their eye out and say, "Oh, avoid this."
Yeah, no, probably positive story. So as we've been trying to use AI capabilities within our practice, I kind of guinea pigged a client about 6 months or a year ago, and I basically did full transparency with them. I said, so here's what we're going to try. I said, we're getting, we'd already come through COVID and everyone's doing all these meetings remotely. We're going to start recording all these meetings. We're going to start to use AI to summarize what we're seeing and help us with it. Do all that kind of legwork that has to be done. That used to take hours and hours and hours to cram through. I used to record these meetings and then go back through them. And so I full transparency to the client, decided that's the way we would approach it, and we'll kind of work with the outcomes I had. And so some of the first output wasn't perfect, but what was interesting is this client basically decided that they partnered with me to improve, this makes sense and this doesn't make sense. I tweaked some of the ways we were asking things, because ultimately they wanted the best results for them. And this was a little bit of a person who has a little bit of a he can be a tech geek from himself, and so he and I were kind of collaborating. And to be honest, actually take it back. The reason I went to him first is over coffee, and this is again one of those clients who's I would consider someone I'm close with. Over coffee once mentioned to me, he's like, have you thought about, he actually was talking about me getting into AI for risk management, broad. And that's what AI kind of falls. The AI world now is under this risk tech umbrella, the other, that beyond the RIMUS vendors. He's like, I think there's a niche here for helping risk managers and claims professionals use AI. And I'm doing that now. And the reason I'm doing it is because this client over coffee said, we're struggling with this stuff. If you figured out how to do it, you're already kind of the tech guru in the space. Why not become the AI guru? And so when I said, all right, we're going all in, you've got a new project. Let's see if we can figure this out. So it was never a nightmare. Knock on wood, I haven't had any nightmare experiences.
Right.
Sometimes you get you send something over the wall and you don't hear for a while, and did I hit the mark? Did I get it right? And then you just find out that they were busy. They were in the middle of their renewal and they didn't have time to get back and thoroughly read your research and your report. So good news is not a lot of the horror stories.
That's great. And again, I think that's a relationship thing.
Yeah.
I honestly feel like we've got a similar environment where it's like you work really well with, oh, this is not perfect, this is how I kind of want it, and then we're flexible. And I think those are always the best, when you just have a good relationship with the client and you work together for an end goal, and that's great.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've seen over the course of the last 10 years or so is, and I think this goes to kind of our experience, we used to do a lot of work on the front end of helping organizations make those selections, figure out what they're looking for, make selections, and then they'd move on. They'd pick a vendor. We'd probably be there all the way through that. And then they'd go and they'd do their own thing, and I may or may not hear from them. What I'm finding more now, and we're still doing that work, is that takes us, we stay involved in implementations. And it's because I think we show our experience and our ability to help them solve problems. We also learn a whole lot more than the vendor does at that point, right? The vendors made some sales presentations. They don't really fully understand what the client is looking to do. And so I mentioned earlier, kind of being that bridge or that olive branch, as you said. But we also then, we don't stay involved after go live continuously, but I find I have more and more clients now where we come in and we do stewardship with them, with their vendor, to make sure things are moving in the right direction. Or we'll check back in a year and we'll do a project because we may not have done everything on phase one. And I think part of that is just that how we've evolved over the 10 years or so to being really, I mean, we're trusted partners with our clients. And so instead of like, hey, walk me through the process and select, and that's great. Hey, we want you to make sure you stay here so that our implementation's a success. And we want you to be, an independent voice for us after the fact, making sure we're getting the most we can out of these systems. So I'm probably as proud of that as anything, that we're, instead of kind of just checking the boxes and helping them pick a system and hoping for the best. In a lot of cases, except for maybe some follow-up, I wouldn't know if it went live well, if they're getting the most out of it. And now, more than half of our opportunities, we stay involved through implementation, and many more now that we do these stewardship reviews with them.
I love it. That's great. Good for the client. Good for you.
Exactly.
So that always works out. Okay, last thing we'll do a little quick fire. Couple of questions. We can just fire at you, just quick responses. They're not scary. So, all right, first one. Biggest trend you've missed?
Biggest trend I've missed. Wow. That's a good one. I wouldn't say it's AI. I think I've been on that one. I think still trying to figure out a way to help smaller clients. What I'm seeing in my research, which drives me crazy, is more and more middle market type organizations are buying these tools, these RIMUS tools. I'm literally looking at this data this morning, and it's growing. And my side of the business, that's not growing. I'm working with the larger set of clients. So I'm missing it. I wouldn't say I've missed it, but I'm missing that part of the trend in my space.
Okay, I like it. I think I know one thing that consultants need to start doing. We covered that, I think, in pretty much depth.
Well, yeah.
Get on AI. What about one thing consultants should stop doing?
One thing consultants should stop doing. I think they need to I'm going to maybe answer it a little differently. I think they need to rethink the way they approach their projects. I think these long drawn out multi-day events locked in a room trying to whiteboard the problems is draining. I've done similar cycles with clients that I've known for many years, where when I was a vendor, we used to whiteboard, and now I'm in more of this dynamic phase where we dig in individually with stakeholders. And I think we get more benefits out of that. I think there's a lot to be said for kind of breaking up the process, and you just, when you do these bigger, I used to lock myself in a room with clients for days at a time. I mean, everyone's just exhausted at the end. And what really happens is, even if you whiteboarded everything, you forget the context to half of it at the front end of it. So that's probably what that would be. And I'd stop doing things the old school. Even if it is an AI, just using technology tools to improve the process. And I know too many consultants that still do a lot of pen and paper type of exercises.
I like it. I think that's a great way. Actually, one more. What's your favorite pizza topping?
Oh, mushrooms, 100%.
You got to go with the fungi. Have you ever been to Windsor, Ontario?
Yes, once.
In
Isn't
Windsor,
that the place you go south from Detroit? Is it you go south to go north? It's
that's
so
it.
weird.
Over the bridge, and you go south to go to Canada.
Go to Canada. Yeah.
They put canned mushrooms on their pizzas. And I know it sounds, they also shave the pepperoni on a cheese grater, but you got to try Windsor pizza. It's all Italians, mostly Sicilians, a lot of Italians there.
Pepperoni, that's interesting.
So next time you get up there, or even Toronto, there's a place called Ambassador Pizza in Toronto that does Windsor pizza. Yeah. Canned mushrooms sounds disgusting, but trust me, it's unique. You maybe don't trust me, but whatever. I'm a mushroom guy too. I'm a fun guy.
Yeah, you're a fun guy. I'm kind of boring with like, I probably could think of some more interesting one, but if you were giving me my one choice, it's going to be mushrooms.
I think that's the best. I don't need too many things. Piling it up with peppers and everything, I don't need it.
Exactly.
Well, it's been great to chat to you. One thing before we jump off, how can people find out about you? Where can people get the report from? All that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So websites, Redhand Advisors, Redhand, redhandadvisors.com. If you search RIMUS report, RMIS report, that'll take you there as well. On Twitter at PJ O'Neill, so PJONEILL 66. And you can find us on LinkedIn as well, both Redhand Advisors and Patrick O'Neill, spelled O'Neil.
Love it. Thanks, Pat. This has been great. Have a lovely weekend, mate.
You
And I'll
too.
see you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Bye bye.
Cheers.